At the end of Q1, we had 6 million US in cash and 45 million US in debt. Today, we have around 5 million in debt, about 75 million US in cash. That's some Bitcoin and Core and Solana, but like 55 million US in cash plus Bitcoin, Solana, and Core.
I'm curious if you have any insight into what might be announced this week at Bitcoin Nashville.
I would be very surprised if he's coming to a Bitcoin conference not prepared to say something very, very bullish about the US government and what his planned economic platform will be for crypto. So again, like this is that seminal moment. I really think people aren't paying attention to it.
How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. Today we're going to be talking with Russell Starr, who's the CEO of Defi Tech. He owns a bunch of the company. It's a company that I've said is undervalued several times. It's pumped since then. It's come back down to earth. I think it's an important time to be talking to him, especially because he runs a very large crypto company that's buying Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. It's buying Solana as a strategic reserve. They're buying a Bitcoin almost like a layer 2 as a strategic reserve as well. They're buying back shares. It's a really interesting company and they're very well connected. So I want to ask him about what's happened recently in crypto, what's going to happen at Bitcoin Nashville. This is also a company that has been in the news a lot recently. They've had a lot of huge announcements. And this is a company also that Anthony Pompliano and Will Clemente also own a significant part of, because they actually sold their own company, their research company, to DeFi Technologies, took stock for their compensation. So I wanna dig into this. If you don't mind, hit subscribe, turn on the bell notification so you can see future videos like this. It was a fascinating conversation. I'm gonna leave links to them underneath the video as well in case you want to learn some more about their company. Always do your own research, but let's get into the video. Russell, thanks so much for coming on the channel. I want to start with what's happening with the elections. I mean, it seems like everything is so political right now. Obviously, with Biden just announcing yesterday they wasn't going to be running. Trump, the assassination attempt, pumped Bitcoin, and then Vance was named as the VP, and he's been in tech for a while, very pro crypto. I'm curious how much importance you place on who the president is next term.
Well, I mean, there were two schools of thought that a Biden presidency was going to be incredibly inflationary and thereby sort of a challenge for the US dollar theoretically, and might be pro Bitcoin. But I'm going to take my quotes from the All In podcast. It's kind of a done deal, in my opinion, that this is a Trump Vance government. And they are extremely pro Bitcoin. And I was legitimately on a call maybe early last week, and I think we're looking at the $90,000 to $150,000 Bitcoin that everybody's been talking about, just because of their platform, their positioning, their desire to have the US dollar not be the the global settlement currency, to allow it to actually devalue a bit, because it really has been struggling. It's a major headwind for the US economy. And this whole Bitcoin strategy, Bitcoin as a part of your fundamental platform, is going to be nothing but earth-shattering and mind-blowing, in my opinion, for the crypto industry. And anyone not paying attention to it and playing it right now is, I think, missing out on one of those once-in-a-lifetime trading opportunities.
Sure. How likely do you think it is that they make Bitcoin part of their strategic reserve? Like, is that just something that they're saying to, I mean, ahead of Bitcoin Nashville, to get some extra donations, to get some high-ticket seats, or do you think it's pretty likely?
It's my understanding from reasonable sources, we have a few, that they plan on a complete about face with the SEC, that you will see an incredibly pro crypto SEC, and you will see it as part of their financial ecosystem. The quantum, I don't know, but if you just look at gold flows as sort of a proxy for Bitcoin, and if you were to take 1% to 3% of gold flows and just put that into Bitcoin, you're looking at a massive run in crypto in general, right? Bitcoin is kind of going to be the boat, or the tide that floats all boats. So my thesis has always been, all you need is 1% or 2% of global equity flows, or 3% of gold flows, and you're looking at a much higher crypto price. So even if it's not a major part of their platform, and it's It's something that they leverage, at least to a certain extent. You're looking at higher crypto prices no matter what, and I think you're looking at like I said, one of those just once in a lifetime trading opportunities.
It seems like other countries are starting to maybe price this into, or starting to look at this with some US dollar sanctions happening recently, some SWIFT bans. And it seems like, from what I heard, Russia and China are starting to use maybe USDT to try to go around some of these issues. Do you think that elevates the importance of crypto and getting in earlier rather than later?
Absolutely. Like, if you just think about it logically, and I will preface this with, look, I got a master's in economics. I started my PhD in economics. So I'm not just sort of talking about this from a fun and fancy sort of perspective. I've been reading about basically the petro yuan. You're looking at a way to settle oil and gas in terms of gold and yuan or renminbi. You're looking at Russia going around sanctions that the US has imposed using crypto. You don't necessarily need to use crypto to get around it, but the bigger point, the more important point, is you're seeing just mass wholesale selling of US treasuries, and you're seeing the purchase of gold, crypto. There was one of the really interesting things that you can watch is Chinese net FX outflows. And as soon as those spike, it usually means that crypto's in for a pretty big run, and that just popped, I think, last week. So yeah, it really does make fundamental economic sense, and I get it. Look, this is a new currency theoretically. It's a new store of value. I was a gold guy, and I always remember talking with my old business partner saying, you can't buy a crypto, you can't buy a Bitcoin wedding ring, you can't buy a Bitcoin watch. These are things that just don't exist. But after all of the, let's call them what they are, black swan events that in my opinion, were just major opportunities to just destroy Bitcoin. And here we are at nearing all-time highs. To me, that's proof in and of itself that this is a fundamental opportunity that anyone who isn't taking advantage of is likely going to miss out on. Now, that being said, a lot of people are happy to miss the first 300% and catch the next 5,000%. So maybe that's a trade that's in play, but I'd rather catch it all.
So. Yeah, definitely. That's where the fortunes are made, in that first 300% and the 5,000 after that. Obviously, I mean, we talked about a couple of the things there that have happened recently with some of the black swan events, maybe the banking collapse. There have been so many things that happened this year. And I think sometimes if people don't see a move in the price of Bitcoin as soon as the news is announced, they think that maybe it's not that big a deal. So I'm curious, what do you think is the most important, or some of the most important events that unfolded this year, some of the most important news?
Well, obviously the FTX fiasco. People, I think, incorrectly were targeting Bitcoin itself when the actual fundamental weakness were the players, right? You can have a great financial economic system and you're still going to have a Bernie Madoff. That doesn't mean that the U.S. financial system is crap because Bernie Madoff got away with a multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme. Similarly, FTX. Similarly, Three Arrows Capital. You look at Voyager Digital, which was a high flyer maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. People often mischaracterize and sometimes look at us and characterize us as a similar company to Voyager Digital. Voyager Digital's issue had nothing to do with the staking of its coins. It had to do with lending to a single entity and leveraging that loan, and that entity went under. So again, just poor mismanagement of capital by Three Arrows Capital. So these are all negative, what I would call those negative black swan events, but singularly, the biggest one was the Donald Trump assassination attempt. To me, that was the inflection point, the get in, go in 2 feet. This isn't dip your toe into the shallow end. This is a Bitcoin run for the ages that's about to start. And I think you're going to look back in, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, and this is going to be one of those, oh man, I wish I'd bought Amazon or Microsoft decades ago type trades, where everything was lined up. And you and I were just talking about this, like DeFi. I mean, I'm always going to want to try to take it back to a little bit of DeFi. We're trading at 3 times earnings, right? Like we're on track for like 160 million US. And if Bitcoin gets to 100, 120, we'll have $1 billion in AUM. $1 billion in AUM gets us to 100 million in revenue. And our trading desk is crushing it. Again, this is just one of those massive opportunities. And yeah, do we lever ourselves off the crypto universe? Absolutely. But that's, I mean, good for us.
Yeah, definitely. And let's bring it back to DeFi, or bring it over to DeFi. I've talked about DeFi a handful of times on the channel. At first, the first thing that I said when I introduced it the first time is I think this is undervalued, even though it's run up 1,500% this year. Maybe you can explain to people that haven't seen those integrations, those videos that I talked about DeFi, what DeFi does just in a nutshell, and then maybe how you got started there.
Sure. So I'll start with how I got started there. I kind of, I do like the Dave at Wendy's type thing. I liked it so much, I bought the company type thing. So I just bought a ton of stocks. So I'm long around 18 to 20 million shares. That's probably my biggest position I've ever taken. And the reason why DeFi is so instrumental and such a leader in today's marketplace, everybody's talking about the Bitcoin ETF, and that was a big inflection point. We were talking about macro fundamental, big issues, and the Ethereum ETF is going to be another big one. You've seen, I think it's Van Eck that's applied for a Solana ETF. You've got the SEC that just despises this ecosystem because it is anti-US dollar. If you think about it, it's an opportunity cost. You get long it, you're effectively, I mean, you're not shorting the US dollar, but you're in essence taking a negative perspective on the US dollar. It's, Bitcoin is anti-inflationary. The US dollar is more inflationary than anything I've ever seen. And you see Gensler say stuff like, and this was when he was going up against Grayscale, he was like, well, this is bad for the US dollar. And in my mind, I'm like, man, Gensler, like you've got it all wrong. What's bad for the US dollar is printing trillions of it. That's what's bad for it, not Bitcoin as a competitive or a solution to it. So what do we do when the Bitcoin ETF was announced? We had about 20 other ETFs. We have a Bitcoin ETF already. We call it Bitcoin Zero. We have Ethereum Zero. We charge zero management fee. We just press released another Bitcoin product where we actually pay individuals 5.65% to get long Bitcoin. The challenge is that the US has been so negative, this ecosystem, that we've been doing all of this in Europe. Basically, the rest of the world is light years ahead of the US, which is counterintuitive, right? The US is usually light years ahead of everybody. So you got Canada, who basically just does whatever the US does. So our regulator hates crypto. US regulator hates crypto, but here we are now with 25 they're ETPs in Europe, but they're basically ETFs. And the single biggest difference for us is our revenue model is management fees, except for those two products I mentioned, Bitcoin Zero and Ethereum Zero. So we have management fees, and then we can stake and lend all these products. So you lend Bitcoin, you stake everything else. And we generate an average yield of about 10% off of every dollar invested in the company. So when I was saying to you, Bitcoin gets to 100,000, we're at $1 billion. And these are all US dollar figures. That's 100 million in revenue for us. And the other beautiful thing about this company is it's brutally cheap to run. Only costs us about 10 million bucks a year to run. And you were referencing, sorry, this is a big mouthful, but I'm trying to cover it all for you.
Yeah.
The stock has done really well, but the stock has done really well because last year was crypto winter. We were barely surviving. We had two counterparties whom we thought were partners just blasting out their stock. We bought all of that. We had to do two small financings, $4 million bucks. No one else would do them. We did them ourselves as management, which I think is something you want to see. So management and insiders are along like 100, 120 million shares. So substantial insider ownership, which I think is a prerequisite for any company you invest in. You want to see management literally in the trenches with you trying to make this work. And then you fast forward to November, December, they're starting to talk about this Bitcoin ETF, Bitcoin showing life. And then you get to Q1 and Bitcoin's starting to rip. And so at the end of Q1, we had 6 million US in cash and 45 million US in debt. Today, we have around 5 million in debt, about 75 million US in cash. That's some Bitcoin and core and Solana, but at like 55 million US in cash plus Bitcoin, Solana, and Core. We're embarking on a Bitcoin Solana Core treasury strategy. So we have flipped this company around completely. And so people look at it and they're like, wow, this is up so much, I can't touch it. I got to wait for it to come back. Meanwhile, as you and I were talking about before we started, we've made $100 million this last quarter in trading profits. And we're on track to do 50 or 60 million on our AUM. And then next year, if we get to $1 billion, and we should, we've got 20 more products, and we're launching this business model in the Middle East. We're going to try to launch it in Africa, Latin America, Asia. The math gets stupid, but just to answer your question, valuation wise, even though like it's rare you see this, but I've said this many times, the profits have gone up faster than the market cap. So we've actually gotten cheaper as we've outperformed, and that is such an unusual situation. So, the S&P trades at an average multiple of 20 times earnings. Galaxy's at I think 23. Coinbase is at 30 or 40. Robinhood's at 30 or 40. We're at 3. There's your opportunity.
Yeah, that's crazy. That was going to be one of my next questions too, is how you're going to insulate yourself if there is another bear market. So that way you're not still like you said, like really down with the whole market was down. It was hard to survive. But I think you pretty much answered that. And I think it's important for people to realize that, especially with a company that was so close to, having, so it was so rough. And then everything turns around and you're printing money that you don't necessarily get those same prices. Like it's a fundamentally different company than it was. It's not Amazon that adds, 2% cash each quarter or something like that. And it's basically the same company it was a year ago, just slightly more revenue and more profit. But I mean, I want to hit on some of the stuff you talked about. I feel like there's been such an emphasis on companies that have made Bitcoin a treasury asset recently. There have been a lot of companies that have done that, or maybe 10, 20 that I've seen consistently do that. You guys did that, but then you went one step further and then also added Solana and CoreDAO as well, which I'm an investor in CoreDAO. Before I even looked at DeFi, I was an investor in CoreDAO as one of my top holdings. And I'm guessing that's how you're getting the 5% yield as well on that. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about that decision to not just go with Bitcoin, but I mean, your name implies it, DeFi, right? You're not just a Bitcoin only company. So I'm kind of curious about that decision to invest in several different cryptos as a core asset, and you're buying millions of dollars of them.
Look, our perspective is that this isn't just a Bitcoin trade. This is an ecosystem at large. And a lot of people may not know this, but we bought Anthony Pompliano's research company, Reflexivity Research, a while back. So Pomp and Will work for us, and they're amazing, and they do great research. And Core is maybe the most interesting protocol out there. It's generating close to 15% yield. It's almost a layer 2 on Bitcoin, which it fundamentally doesn't make any sense. I say that to people and they're like, I don't believe that. And I'm like, just go read their white paper and look at what they're doing. It's one of the more liquid products that are on Coinbase. I think it's going to be a top performer. And so we just decided that Bitcoin, as I mentioned, is the tide that floats all boats, but you can have outperformers like Solana. And we still have a view on Solana. We actually think it should be its own kind of mini MicroStrategy type perspective. Core is incredible. It'll still largely be Bitcoin, but I think it makes a lot of sense to diversify into the DeFi space, the altcoin space. A lot of people are talking about how this is the altcoin season. Part of the reason that Anthony Pompliano was really interested in taking equity rather than cash, and people were offering him extremely high valuations just on his company, largely because of him. He's such an incredible mouthpiece for the space. But his view was that I want to get along a company that focuses on the altcoin space, and that's what we do. We have the Bitcoin ETF, we have the Ethereum ETF. We have several Bitcoin ETFs and a couple of Ethereum, but then we've got 20 other products, and that's going to continue. We're going to keep on launching these Hashadera, ICP, stuff that people have never ever heard of. We're going to be launching these ETPs, and you get a real move in that altcoin market. We benefit on the treasury side, We benefit on our product side. We benefit as a company. It made intuitive sense.
Sure. Is there ever going to be I mean, I know that you can't say with full certainty, but is there a time where you could see yourself selling some of those treasuries? Let's say we get a year further in, Solana's at $700, or is it just
Yeah.
long term? We're going to keep on adding whenever we see it.
Well, I'll just quote Michael Saylor and say they are the end.
Okay, I like it. Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. Such a
Sure.
happy problem to have, right?
Yeah.
Well, throw it in there though.
Yeah.
Being long as much US dollars as we are, which is inflation in the US is legit. I often say to US investors, you need to actually make like 15 to 18% on your portfolio just to keep up with the deflationary or the inflationary tendencies of the US dollar. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, just do the math. Do the math.
Yeah.
So look to us to actually start going into more of these, and maybe it'll just be core Bitcoin and Solana, but I just don't see us holding 50, 60 million US on our balance sheet with what's going on with the US dollar.
That makes sense. Yeah, the cushion there already.
Yeah.
Would you guys be interested in some kind of buyout if, I don't know, Coinbase came over and said, hey, we want to buy this and integrate it within our products? Would you be interested in that or no? And then what kind of price would you be looking at?
Well, you answered the first question with the second question. It really depends on price. And what I say to people is, really good management teams know their companies should always be for sale. We could theoretically, I mean, I can see this company having 4 or 5 billion in AUM. Again, you do that math. That 4 billion is 400 million US in revenue, 390 million US in profits. Like, I can see that as a potential outcome. And yes, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, and yes, maybe I'm a little bit crazy, but you have to believe in what you're doing. But when you're trading at 3 times earnings and someone else is trading at 30 times earnings, they can come in and pay 12, 15 times earnings. Like, they could pay us $10 Canadian, $7, $8 US right now. And people would view that as a huge win. Multi-100% return, but it's still a take under because most companies trade at 20 times earnings. So again, I don't know what that answer is going to be. I do know that it's very, very good that we have as much ownership of this company as we do, because that forces a friendly, right? You got 30% ownership, 33% ownership amongst management and friends. You force people to be friendly. Wait and see. Let's wait and see.
Okay. You recently announced a buyback as well, a stock buyback. I'm curious how you weigh a stock buyback at a time where obviously you've said several times you think you're undervalued. Weighing that versus Bitcoin or Solana or Core. Is it just, hey, we have $10 million, let's split it up a little bit? Or is there some, I don't know, more extensive way of evaluating which way to go?
So the way I look at it is, if you're trading at 3 times earnings and everything else trades at 20 times earnings, you probably should be buying your stock back. That being said, I think in our perspective, we're better off investing in Bitcoin, Solana, and Core than we are buying our stock back. So you'll see us dip our toes in to pick some stock up every now and then. I think we were doing it a little bit on Friday. I think we're doing it a little bit today. But it's not going to be a fundamental driving strategy of value for us. Building the business is what we want to do, and building the business. I think you get more bang for your buck with Bitcoin, Solana, and Core, and more products and launching in other jurisdictions, and all of those cost money. And we just happen to have a boatload of it now. So I'd rather see us, operating in Asia and the Middle East and driving AUM and using the capital to do that than just buying our stock back.
Awesome. I appreciate you coming on, Russell. Maybe you can tell us where we can find you. I'll leave links to all this underneath the video, but if people want to learn a little bit more.
Sure. So best way to reach me is my email. It's rstar, that's with 2 R's, at defi.tech. That'll get to me anytime, and I'm really open and will respond to anyone who reaches out.
Awesome. And then one last fun question. I don't know if you can tell me this, but obviously you're very well connected in crypto. there have been a lot of rumors this week. I don't know, like Elon Musk possibly going to the Bitcoin conference, maybe buying some more Bitcoin, Trump talking about Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, like all kinds of stuff that could be announced this week. I'm curious if you have any insight into what might be announced this week at Bitcoin Nashville or just in the next couple weeks in general.
Well, look, I obviously I don't know Donald Trump. I've read some books on him. Clearly, he's a legendary figure, and whatever you may say about him, it's pretty obvious to me that what he wants is what's best for the U.S. and not what's best for him personally. Just after this last weekend's events, that's just my personal opinion. I would be very surprised if he's coming to a Bitcoin conference not prepared to say something very, very bullish about the US government and what his planned economic platform will be for crypto. So again, like this is that seminal moment. I really think people aren't paying attention to it. People are buying, AI companies left, right, and center when they can't even see a return on the amount of money they're investing right now. And then you've got companies like us who are just spitting out capital and cash and just waiting for that tidal wave of investments to come. So maybe with a little bit of luck, both of what you just described will occur.
Awesome. Russell, thanks so much for coming on. Links are underneath the video if you want to check him out more or check out the company. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.